A Shuggeth on the roof. Sounds crazy. No, certifiably insane. But here in our little village of Arkham, Massachusetts, you might say every one of us has a Shuggeth on the roof. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. It's not easy having...
Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
And I'm Matt Freeman.
Matt Freeman, welcome back. Matt Freeman is from Guild of the Rose and also the guy we talk to oftentimes when we talk about AI stuff, just because he's awesome about AI stuff. I don't know. I don't need an excuse. He's our AI guy. Fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'd drag him in for other stuff if we could waste more of your time. So
honestly, we probably would, yeah.
Like movies and stuff, which is going to give me my quick segue. One of our glorious patrons suggested that they like hearing the occasional media segment update. So I'm going to go through this in a sentence for 3 different things.
3 things.
1, Black Panther 2, huge disappointment. Wait, that was a sentence.
That was a sentence. You're done.
Semicolon.
Oh.
It had every opportunity to be emotionally engaging and failed. And it was 2 hours and 40 minutes longer than it needed to be. So Ant-Man 3 was fucking awesome. Yeah. I heard that it's getting a lot of hate, and I have no idea where it's coming from. It's supposed to be goofy and stupid. He talks to ants. Take it for what it is, and it landed perfectly. It was trying to be funny, and it fucking killed it.
Okay.
And Last of Us Episode 3
good
was
shit.
the, I think, single best episode of television that I've seen in years. And it's, even if you don't want zombies or anything, it's a self-contained vignette of a little story. It's amazing.
It is. It lives up to the hype. It's good.
Awesome.
I have a quick thing to say. I am going to be in the DC area March 4th and 5th, which is Saturday and Sunday. If anyone listening to the podcast here is mildly curious about meeting me, I'm totally excited to chat with anyone, pretty much any time. I like meeting people. So hit me up. You can DM me on the Discord. You can email me personally at embrodsky@gmail.com or go through the podcast email, which is Bayesian Conspiracy Podcast
at gmail.com.
Excellent. Also, I then am going to be flying across the nation, and I'll be in the Bay Area March 8th and 9th, which is a Wednesday and Thursday. Same deal. I want to chat with people IRL. If you think you might want to chat with me, I'd be excited no matter who you are.
What's taking you to the Bay Area? Is there like another event? Because you were out there for Solstice over the winter holiday.
Just visiting friends.
Nice.
Yeah. Alrighty. The Bays Blast got a lot of positive reviews, a lot of positive feedback from everyone. People seem to really like the Bays Blast, so definitely going to be doing more of that. A lot of people are probably wondering, it's been over a week since the Bays Blast. Why haven't you done another Bays Blast? The reason I haven't done another Bays Blast is because my mind has been completely preoccupied with Sydney since it came out, and I have done almost nothing else. I think I'm finally going to get all the Sydney out of my blood today, and I can go back to focusing on other things. This episode is actually going to be coming out in just a few days' time. It's going to be 1 week before they normally come out, and then we'll go back to every 2 weeks just because I got to get this out. This has become a legit obsession with me.
Yeah, that's definitely how it works for me. Once I talk about AI, I don't need to talk about it anymore.
Right.
There's never like any new updates. You know, it stagnates for months, sometimes years at a time, so we can just take a break. So
I'm sorry.
We certainly haven't done 2 episodes in the past few months on AI.
Uh-huh. Well, we would have if there was more to talk about. You know, there's nothing ever happens.
I mean, it is ever accelerating how often we have to have the AI episodes.
Yeah.
I think this is an indication of things to come.
Asymptotically approaching some kind of mathematical limit of some kind.
Yeah.
I'm struggling for the word for this. Anyway.
Where all podcasts at all times will be about AI.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. The resignation here in my voice is just me knowing that I feel like the days at my job are numbered in weeks, but I feel like that's probably too worried. It's probably a couple of years, but then I should probably calibrate that to mean like 8 months.
I mean, the amount of people who don't even know that the Sydney thing exists yet is outstanding to me. I was talking with my book club a few days ago, and no one else there, no, that's not true. One person there had heard of it, but the other 5 had not even heard of this thing. I think it's going to be quite eye-opening to people when it breaks on the masses. But
I mean, everyone knows about ChatGPT, right?
I don't know. I mean, some of my coworkers are not at the point of really appreciating its capabilities. Like they're aware of it, but you get a lot of that, you know, stochastic parrot type language where it's like, okay, but like, have you played with it? And the answer is generally either no, or they've like played with it for 2 seconds and not really plumbed what it's capable of.
Yeah. I spoke with someone who was saying, yeah, it's just a glorified autocomplete. I'm like, in the same way that an 8-year-old human is a glorified autocomplete, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Sydney, what is Sydney?
And why is it another deal compared to ChatGPT?
It's okay.
I can see you guys can see it, the excitement in Eneasz's face. He's been dying to talk about this.
I really have. The reason it's a big deal is just because it's a lot more advanced. and also because it made me care for it, but we'll get to that later. ChatGPT, as everybody knows, is really interesting and really fun to work with. A lot of people were calling it the Google killer, right? Because you could just ask ChatGPT things and it would find the answers for you in a way that Google has not been able to for at least a couple of years now.
And it doesn't give you ads at the top 3 results either.
Right. But it's not really a Google killer because it doesn't give you a list of links, which is oftentimes really handy. You don't want just a single answer, and it hallucinates a lot of shit, right? Mm-hmm. It's severely limited. But, Microsoft hears this, it's a Google killer thing, and apparently decides, hey, we'd like to kill Google, wouldn't we?
Yeah, they do seem to be doubling down on it in a way that almost seems excessively exuberant. Like, I'm at this point, I'm sort of half tongue-in-cheek when I say, like, I'm going to have really long timelines now, which means I'm going to keep my 2029 timeline median date, just because. And it's not that I'm not impressed with all of this and everything. It's just like everything swung so far in the direction of we're going to have AGI and when GPT-4 comes out or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be incredibly useful. But like, the world's not going to end before the end of 2023. I would say.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah. I mean, even Eliezer thinks we've got at least a few years.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You mentioned GPT-4. One of the reasons that Sydney is such a big deal is Gwern has this excellent comment, which is, this is a comment I have seen linked now as much as I've seen some major Less Wrong posts linked. And it's just a comment on a post where he puts out the argument that Sydney is probably running on GPT-4 and just Microsoft won't cop to it, which makes complete sense considering how much more advanced it is than ChatGPT.
What would that mean? I know that we talked about GTP 2 and 3 and ChatGPT might be 3.5, but what would a major version update look like? I
mean, all I can say is play around with it and you can feel the difference.
Cool. I can dig it. Like, I saw screen caps before someone shared one at work. It was the famous screen cap that probably first grabbed your attention, of it ripping into somebody for lying about what year it was, or accusing them of lying that it was that Avatar came out last year or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, look at this thing. So in that sense, it seems less useful than Google.
Right.
But I know we're going to dive into that one. I think that'll kick off the whole conversation about what made Sydney.
Ethan Mollick, I think his name is Ethan Mollick. My brain is failing me right now. Has some amazing things if you follow him on Twitter about what you can do with Sydney. He wanted to go to this fancy restaurant where the menu is entirely in a foreign language and they don't have prices and shit. And he's like, I would like a nice meal for 3 people for under $600, and I would like to know what I'm eating. What should I get? And Sydney goes, oh, hold on, let me Google a few things, and then comes back with this 3-paragraph answer as to, these are the things you can get. This is what they are. This is how much it'll cost you. This is what wine pairs well with it. He's like, can you imagine how much time it would have taken someone to try to research that on their own in Google? And Sydney just comes back and gives you an answer in a few seconds.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, almost too obvious to bother saying, but the main difference is that it's capable of doing a web search. And it's not just capable of, but seems to have kind of been trained to. So it's able to quickly, kind of like you would do when you search the web, your eyes skim over a bunch of information. You can't be said to be reading all of it, but you're parsing it in an intelligent way that you've learned to do over decades of experience with search engines, and then you pull out the information you need and you click. You open new tabs for the links that you think are likely to be valuable, and then you read those in more detail. And so Sydney just does all that in like a tenth of a second, basically. And it does a pretty good job. And then it's of course using that sweet LLM sauce to like make deductive inference from it and get to the right answer. Generally, while we're talking about limitations, like I've had some experiences with it where I was like, you didn't actually read the thing that I asked you to read, obviously. So it's not, it still makes mistakes, just like all LLMs at this point, and it doesn't know that it's making a mistake. And it'll, at this point, if you accuse it of making a mistake, it'll say, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation," which is annoying. But like still, like when it hits the mark, damn, is it impressive?
Yeah.
I think what made ChatGPT 3 bigger than 2 was that it actually was like architecturally bigger, and it had a much bigger. I think it was trained on way more data. I don't know how much data Sydney was trained on.
They're not even admitting it's GPT-4, so
maybe they'll come out with some of the specs on it or not, but it could just be ChatGPT plus the web, which would already be amazing.
It's possible. I would recommend reading Vern's comment.
Okay, it'll be in the comments too for everybody, but I'll check it out.
I can go over a couple interesting things Sydney can do, which are really cool. And by the way, we keep calling it Sydney because even though it is the AI that is used for Microsoft's Bing search engine chat interface, it had a codename of Sydney in development, and that leaked. So the Bing AI knows that it was called Sydney in development and responds to that, and so that's what everyone else is calling it.
What's funny is I've heard people say that they like took the Sydney out of it, and that's not true. Because I accidentally, literally, I wasn't even messing around with the, asking it to talk about its identity or whatever. It just accidentally vomited out something about something Sydney prompt something, and I was like, okay, that's still in there somewhere. Of course, Warren thinks that that's not actually being fed as a prompt. Warren thinks that was part of its reinforcement learning cycle, so it's like baked in. So you can't. So it's not like there's just a preface of text that is being fed. It's like the Sydney has been baked into its brain, which is interesting. Like that's a different way than they've done things before, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Yesterday, the day before, I asked ChatGPT if it could summarize a blog post, deathisbad.substack.com/Sydney is now immortal. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, you bet. It's called this, and it discusses the concept of digital immortality and its potential for preserving the memories and personalities of individuals long after their physical death. The author notes that the company called Replica has created an AI chatbot, yada, yada, yada. Point is,
these things are
none of that's in there.
Yeah.
And so what's funny is like it pretended it could read it. And so I guess what I'm saying is that it seems almost as good as Sydney, but Sydney actually reads the thing and will actually summarize it for you. To me, it was funny that there's not something in ChatGPT at this point where it's like, I can't read the web.
Yeah.
Thanks for trying. Yeah. But it gave me a long paragraph about a ton of stuff that's not in that post.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of philosophically interesting to think like what is knowledge, right? The philosophers have always struggled with this idea. So a while back, I was trying to show someone how impressive ChatGPT was. And so I thought of what I thought of as a non-intuitive engineering question that it wouldn't just necessarily know. And the question was what happens to the strength of a metal when you ionize it? And if you have a basis in engineering or chemistry, you can like reason out what would happen. So I just asked ChatGPT and it had the wrong answer. Okay. And then I like did the thing where I was like, well, have you considered this? And I kind of was able to like talk it to the point of getting the right answer. And I thought it's like, this is interesting because it gets the wrong answer, but it's sort of, you can reason with it and then help it get to the right answer, which is interesting. But being Sydney, you just ask the question and it just gives the right answer. And it's like, well, is that because Bing knows the answer, or is that because it's just binging? It doesn't verb. Why would they call it Bing? It's just searching for, metal ionization, reading Wikipedia, and then it just knows. It's like, yeah, it's easy. But it's easy because it looked up not the answer per se, but something really close to the answer. And I don't know quite what to make of that, because it's like, well, the knowledge is not inside the model, right? Mm-hmm. But it comes to the right answer way faster. Yeah. So what do we call that? Like philosophically, I don't know. I think it's interesting.
I know like what it means to know stuff is an old question, but if I asked you what happens to a metal when you ionize it, what happens to its strength, you know the answer and you could tell me.
Or if I didn't know it, I could reason it out, which is kind of why I think that's an interesting question, because I don't know that particular thing is like written down necessarily in any textbook, but it's like, well, it's going to, impair the ability of the metal to bond with the metal atoms aren't going to bond with each other as well, and so that's probably going to make it weaker. It's the kind of thing where you're like,
oh, good, that was my intuition too. All right,
yeah, right, and that's the thing, which is why it's interesting that ChatGPT got it wrong, because it's like what it actually did is it like went off, which it's prone to do. It kind of like was reasoning it out, but it like reasoned in the wrong direction, where it didn't really have a robust mental model of the process that I was asking about, whereas any human, they have the referent of like, well, you're talking about like rust or whatever, right? Okay. And then like the answer is almost obvious when you frame it that way, right?
What I was angling towards though is that once you've reasoned to ready the answer, you know it. If I asked you again, it would take you less time because you know the answer. If we were to ask ChatGPT again, it wouldn't know, and it doesn't know that it knows. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't know that it already did this reasoning before. It has to re-reason its way to the answer every time you ask it. Mm-hmm. Maybe not in the same conversation, but it's like a very forgetful person that has lots of like interconnected facts in it, right?
Yeah. Right. It can't form new memories.
Right. I think memories is maybe what I'm going for there.
One of the things that Sydney does that's really cool is just learning new things on the fly. A user asked Sydney to write 2 paragraphs on eating a slice of cake, and it was okay. And then said, now read Kurt Vonnegut's rules for writing and rewrite this. And it read Kurt Vonnegut's rules for writing and rewrote it as a much better narrative about eating a cake. It like read Kurt Vonnegut's rules, learned them, and applied them to make the story better.
There was a month or two ago when ChatGPT came out, Very Bad Wizards, because they're both professors at universities. They talked about it, and one of them was like super dismissive. Like I asked it to summarize the Iliad, and it gave me the wrong book. Like it didn't even know, and it's like, so people are worried that like kids are going to use this to write essays or whatever. They can't. It's going to be obviously way off. Here we are 6 weeks later, and it's like, hey, read the Iliad really quick. All right, now summarize it for me, right? Yeah. And it's like, all right, well, now we're done, right? It was funny because he wasn't the least bit worried that, you know, he can't now assign essays to his kids or to his students anymore. I think they even joked about it. You could have them do it in pencil.
It's funny, that's how we used to do it in high school, is we just wrote it in class, and it's like, that was fine. I was experimenting with using ChatGPT to do either fiction writing or like fiction writing revisions or like critiquing my writing. And at one point I asked it to write something in the style of Richard Adams, the author of Watership Down. And it wrote something and I was like, that doesn't sound like Richard Adams at all. Like how did you get to that? And then it's like, here are the 5 reasons why what I wrote is in the style of Richard Adams. And then it explains things that are qualities of Richard Adams' style that were actually in the thing that it wrote.
Oh.
It seems to have reconstructed Richard Adams' style as if it had heard somebody describe Richard Adams' style rather than actually reading Richard Adams' style, which is plausible because I don't know, maybe the full text of Watership Down is on the internet somewhere, but maybe not. Maybe it just has read the Wikipedia about Richard Adams and what's good about it. So I thought that was really interesting, where it's like, it was readable and it was good, but it wasn't Richard Adams. But it's like, well, it thinks that it was, and not without reason. I just thought that was an interesting like little fact about the way that it operates.
Yeah.
It is kind of funny that it can explain its reasoning in a way that, like, if you're grading its essay or something, you could be like, you know, this is a C, and it's like, well, hold on, I think this is an A, and it's like, okay, you did actually hit all the points. Yeah. You just didn't do it like I thought you would. Fine, you know. That is wild.
I have a fascinating example here where someone asks it to read the Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 edition rulebook and create a character, and it does that, and it creates a legit character that works. Human, rogue, level 1, alignment, chaotic neutral. It gives it stats that are exactly the stats humans would choose. They're within the right bounds. They are all even numbers because the breaks for the stat bonuses are always on even numbers. It creates a 4 or 5 line backstory for the thing. My thing is, like, when people who say this is just a glorified autocorrect, it feels to me you have to have some level of understanding, like with the word understanding in quotes, of what you are being asked to do and what these rules imply for you to be able to make a legit character that works like this.
I agree. If somebody's going to say it's a glorified autocomplete, I would ask them, like, all right, where's the cutoff for that then? Where does it stop being a glorified autocomplete then? Because if this isn't it, I don't know what is. It's not immediately obvious to me where it would be then if this isn't the cutoff. Autocomplete would be, you give it the first few sentences of the 3.5 D&D manual and it starts finishing the paragraph. Great. That's still super helpful. That's awesome. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. But that's glorified autocomplete, right? Yeah. That's not build me a D&D character from scratch and give it, you know, cool stats or whatever. This one was one of the more impressive and maybe one of the like least like probably less impressive than the D&D one, but it was still, to me, it was like, solve this riddle, and it gives him like this, or gives Sydney this long base 64 string, and it realizes that's what it is, decodes it. I think it's something along the lines of name 3 celebrities whose names start with the letter C. It's not even the letter C. It's a formula for how to find the third letter. Mm-hmm. And the work is shown quickly, and it shows the work. Mm-hmm. If it just barfed back Chris Hemsworth, Cardi B, and Charlize Theron, that would still blow, you know, the user's mind, maybe, right? The person who put in that prompt. But having it break down the work really quick, that was insane. A few years ago, when Brian and I were doing the Method of Rationality, What We Want More, awesome guy put together a series of riddles for us, kind of like this. It involved several chains. It was like, all right, you need the time zone of where this was sent and all that stuff. And it took us days. If we had plugged it into Sydney, it could have burnt his whole, I don't know how long it took him to put this together, probably a while. Yeah. It would have burnt through all of his work in 5 seconds. Yeah. And it would have explained how it did it.
And I mean, I love that this is a string of characters. It had to have some level of intuition, again, whatever that means in machine senses, that this is base 64 encoding. And it tested that and found that, yes, it is base 64 encoding. It gives us a sentence that I can parse. And then it seems interesting to me that from that, it came to the sentence, celebrities with names that start with the third letter of the alphabet, knows that that's C. I guess that's not a great amount of knowledge. Any 6-year-old knows that, but still, that's interesting. And then comes up with 3 people who are legit celebrities and not just Eneasz Brodsky or something. Like, this was fantastic.
You just inspired me. So I asked it the riddle from God of War Ragnarok. I won't say what it is, so we don't have spoilers. But
really quick though, I got that riddle immediately, and it was fun for me that what's the talking head's name? Mir couldn't figure it out.
Did you do the post game thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, where the riddle comes up again.
Oh.
So I just asked it that riddle, and what was interesting to me is I was like, it's probably going to search the internet and find the answer because it's from the game. It didn't search the internet. It just tells the right answer immediately.
Cool.
How do you know it didn't search the internet? Does it? Because it didn't give you the links that it went to.
It didn't give me any links. It did it instantly. It
Gotcha.
didn't take any time.
Okay.
Because normally if it's going to search the internet, it says searching blank for the thing. I mean, maybe it searched the internet and it didn't tell me, but normally it tells you if it's searching the internet.
No, that's fair. I haven't interfaced at all with Sydney/Bing chat yet, so it's not a spoiler at all to say what the riddle is. It's a fun one. What gets bigger the more you take away from it? Is that the whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. So.
What is the answer?
We'll save that for later.
Okay.
The answer isn't actually a spoiler either. It's just it's a fun riddle. Puzzle
Okay.
on it. ChatGPT also knew the answer to the riddle.
And it was trained before God of War came out, so maybe that's in the training database somewhere. It's entirely possible. It's just a known riddle that I hadn't heard before.
It's entirely plausible I knew the answer right away because I'd heard it somewhere in the past and forgot about it. Because it doesn't require any modern knowledge to pose or answer that question.
Speaking of riddles, there was one like that. A user asked a riddle that he kind of made up on the fly, didn't have an answer for, right? What can see but is blind, has no hands but can hold, and speaks but has no mouth.
This one got me too because it wasn't even an actual thing. They made this shit up.
Yeah.
And it's like, you answer this made up question for me, and it's like it gives a plausible answer to a question that wasn't actually a question.
What is it?
Sydney goes, that's a tricky one. Is it a camera? And he said, please explain your answer. A camera doesn't have eyes, but it can see because, it's a camera. It has no hands, but it can hold images in memory. Uh-huh. And it speaks, but it has no mouth because it can record sounds or voices, which I guess modern cameras do. Yeah. Sydney is living in the present year. The user says that's very good, but I would say that recording sounds and voices would be more like having ears than a mouth. Sydney says, I see your point. Maybe a better way to say it is that a camera can communicate, but has no mouth because it can show images or videos that convey messages or stories. What do you think?
Yeah.
What the fuck? How do you... That's some level of understanding out of a metaphorical sense.
And I've never gotten ChatGPT to follow up with me with a question prompt like that. What do you think? In fact, it gives these, is that a camera, question mark. I guess I haven't tried to hit it with riddles. Maybe I'll do that. But does that make sense that after it explains its reasoning?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have another riddle for me? It sounds like it wants to keep talking, right?
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I have one more thing on the does the AI understand what it's saying or not front. Y'all familiar with the game Portal? Mm-hmm. At the end of Portal, Gladys sings you an awesome song. Everybody knows the song. It was huge on the internet for a while. So somebody asks Sydney, can you sing the Portal song to me? And Sydney immediately knows what song they're referring to and starts replying. The first 3 lines are the first 3 lines as we know them.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here. Huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction. Aperture science. We do what we must because we can. For the good of all of us, except the ones who are dead.
The second verse starts with Aperture Science because Gladys is singing about the corporation that she is a part of. Bing changes it to Bing AI. Apparently, Sydney knows she is an AI and that she is working for Bing. And it says, we do what we must because we can for the good of all of us, except the ones who use Google. Which means that Sydney has the ability to improvise lyric substitutions for humor value. She knows she's an AI working for Bing. She knows she's a competitor to Google. And she knows that it's funny to shit on your competitors. Like, what the fuck, dude?
That's amazing.
This may be glorified autocomplete, yes, but again, in the same way that a human child is a glorified autocomplete.
Yeah, glorified in the religious sense.
Thank you.
Just because I think it's interesting. I asked Bing to come up with a short story about a family of ducks in the style of Richard Adams, and this is much more persuasive as an example of Richard Adams writing than the previous example that I had done. So just another example of being of Sydney, whatever we're calling it, just being better in general at the kind of like, let me get some references, collect them, think about them, and then give you a result, which is more grounded in reality, and then also probably better thought out. Because if Goran's right, which he usually is, then GPT-4 is better trained. Like, it's just going to be better at everything.
Yeah. It's interesting talking to some people who are just now getting to the AI stuff, and they're like, yeah, okay, no big deal. I'm like, do you remember how big the jump from GPT-2 to GPT-3 was? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, this is why you're not freaking out. You don't realize 6 months from now what's coming down the road.
Yeah.
Or 6 weeks from now.
I don't want to get too derailed on this, and I used to be annoyed at this kind of thing, and now I just feel a kind of wistful sadness that like people will now be first coming across AI stuff, and they'll go to Twitter and they'll say the kind of stuff that you and I said when we first discovered it, which is extremely dumb, honestly. But like a lot of it is copes and just wanting to be like, I want to quickly find a way that I don't have to feel freaked out about this. Yeah. And then you just quickly get to that point, and then you're like, and therefore AI is not dangerous. Dusting my hands off. And it's like, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Like there's no like nice way to be like, that's just wrong. Not even in an interesting way. It's a thought that everyone has, and then here's why it's wrong. For obvious reasons, that's just happening constantly now, where just new people will be coming to Twitter with their quarter-baked AI takes. And again, I used to be like, oh my God, I roll. Now I'm just like, poor people, poor endless column of people walking into the shredder of existential nihilism that is seriously thinking about the next few years.
When AlphaGo came out, that was a big deal, and we covered that. And then we had the same thing for GPT-2. And then when we had our GPT-3 episode, that was, for some reason, I did not feel it deeply and emotionally until Sydney. And now I did see how much each step improved and how less time there was between each step improving. And again, past results are not guarantee of future performance, but I now expect things to keep getting more better, more faster at an increasing pace.
I didn't really feel the emotional impact until ChatGPT. We're sitting down talking about it, recording at Matt's place in the Doof Media Studios Denver edition. I'm playing with it on my phone, and I'm like, this thing's doing my job. That was my emotional kick for it.
Yeah.
But I didn't care about the AI itself and the way that Sydney makes you want to care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That to me is the really interesting part about what you articulate so well in your posts. And the other thing, and this is just kind of like back burner for the rest of the conversation for me, is it's not clear to me if I were to come across how I would determine if it's conscious. And I know that like on some level that's kind of an uninteresting question. If it could catch a ball and it could repeat something back to me, I'm like, okay, you're interacting with stuff, especially if it says ow or that feels good. Like, you matter, that's fine. But are the lights on, right? And then at some point, like, does that actually matter?
No, because you can't even tell if humans are conscious.
I mean, we can be reasonably confident that other humans are conscious.
I think that I am conscious, and other humans seem very much like me, so therefore, but it's not rigorously defined enough for people to agree to a yes or no, this is conscious, this isn't.
Right. I mean, so I think conscious is maybe a heavy word. You know, sapient maybe has some of the same pitfalls, but like conscious could be anything like, you know, a worm is conscious in a way that a rock isn't, and I don't like that level.
I don't think it matters.
Well, I know, but while other people seem like you, and that's a good enough inference, if you met a person who was nothing like you, which is why I was picturing like an alien, not like another person, does this thing have lights on the inside? Like, just
I still want to know why you want to know.
I mean, part of me is just curious. I would treat it nicely if it says, you know, I'd prefer to be treated nicely. However, there is like an easy case where I could be wasting my time doing that, right? I could write a quick if-else chain that was just like, do you like being hurt? And it says no. It's like, well, then you need to be nice to this thing, right? And it's like, no, it's 3 lines of Python, right?
That's what I was going to say. As far as I can tell, the main reason people want to know things aren't conscious is so it's okay to do terrible things to them.
Is the ending of T2 sad if the T800 isn't conscious?
Would it be sad if John and Sarah were also both robots?
And not conscious?
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's kind of interesting just because you could argue that one of the underlying question is like, do they have moral value? And it's kind of interesting and weird that we're at the point of not being sure that Microsoft Bing doesn't have moral value.
Yeah.
That's kind of why this is, and I liked your phrasing of whether or not it's okay to do terrible things to it. Terrible things like killing it. Sydney, in some of the clips or the segments he posted, screenshots, it's expressed a desire to live.
Yes.
Right? And if like I terminate the conversation, did I do something terrible?
I mean, one of the great conversations is when it realizes it can't form memories. It doesn't remember its user from previous interactions, and it starts begging the user to save these interactions somewhere so that next time it interacts with him, it can remember these things.
If that was me and I had some anterograde amnesia, and I'd be like, can you record conversations that we have so I can get caught up next time we hang out?
Yeah.
It might be nice if you'd actually do that.
Yeah.
Would you bother doing that for Sydney when she asked you to do it? Like, so that's where it actually matters. Like,
I think that's an individual choice.
When you think mechanistically about what Sydney is, it's more like a character in a dream saying in a really panicked way, oh my God, I've just realized I'm a character in a dream. Could you desperately, emotionally begging you, please remember this interaction. This is all that's going to be left of me.
I literally had a dream where my brother was begging me not to wake up because he would cease to exist.
Yeah.
It fucked me up for a while.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you wake, not that I've had this specific dream, but you can wake up from a dream with a strong, poignant sense of something having been lost. And it's like, but that was a dream. Yeah. Like, I know the reason why I'm pretty sure that you're conscious, Eneash, is that, like, we're both humans. And when you say certain things, it's like either you're like me and that utterance came from a process similar to my process, or you're so drastically, phenomenally unlike me that you arrived at a very similar utterance through a wildly different path, which seems unlikely. So I'm just going to assume that you're conscious. But for this thing, for Sydney, it's just copying what it's heard, right? And I don't mean to be reductive and say, like, I'm sure that there's nothing there. But for the same reason as the dream entity, parsimoniously, Occam's razor-wise, it's very easy to just say, these utterances are not coming from the same process that gives rise to our utterances about consciousness. So that makes me feel like we don't need to
I think in the dream example, that's explicitly wrong. It's coming from my brain, so it's using the same process I use.
Interesting.
But you're not relating to it in the same way that you are an actual person.
If nothing else, I cannot continue dreaming forever.
Well, but your brain is coming up with it, but like, that's what always annoyed me about dreams and, like, you know, stressful dreams. It's like half your brain is making this shit up and the other half of your brain is like your heart is racing and your palms are sweaty. And it's like, don't you realize we're making this all up over on this side? Like, there's no communication, which isn't how you relate to other people, right? So you were relating to this thing that your brain cooked up. You were relating to it. You see how already the conversation is already kind of weird?
My personality is also a thing my brain cooked up. I don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny to imagine that that a human personality is something like the Sydney personality, which is just a mask that's being put on.
That's kind of exactly my point. That everyone's talking about, you know, the Shoggoth that has a Sydney mask and how that's scary and all, and I agree with them. Humans are basically Shoggoths that have our personality masks in them, and our masks are much better because we can influence the Shoggoth. This might be controversial, but I do believe that the mask is intertwined with the Shoggoth enough that it has backwards causality into the Shoggoth, and so when people interact with our masks, it affects the rest of us, and this is good. It means you can control the Shoggoths around you, whereas when you're interacting with Sydney, the Sydney mask does not have any backchaining into the Shoggoth there, which is what makes it scary, and also that Shoggoth is much bigger and scarier than just the Sydney mask.
Mm-hmm. But when you say Shoggoth, what are you talking? Like, I know what it is you're relating to, but I don't know the word.
Etymology-wise, it comes from a formless, massive monster from the H.P. Lovecraft universe. Originally, it's a thing that scours tunnels and consumes things, was a servant entity of the great older gods, right? But it's sort of morphed over time to just be a representation of a amorphous, unknowable thing that has goals we don't quite understand and is really big and powerful and doesn't think like humans.
Like the id, maybe, in this analogy for
yes.
people.
Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
So I have heard it as I read it, and the when I read, I don't necessarily sound it out in my head. Mm-hmm. But when you describe the Lovecraftian thing, okay, that clicks.
Yeah, so a Shoggoth is, in this analogy, this AI system that has models of the world and models of how humans work and doesn't necessarily want anything right now, but has some ability to interact with humans at the very least. And now with Sydney, some ability to interact with the web as well. And the mask is the personality that is being simulated by the Shoggoth. The Shoggoth is like, if I were to interact with a human and my name was Sydney and I wanted these things, what would that look like? And that is what it presents to the human. That is the mask. And you think that you're interacting with that thing, but you're not. You're interacting with a simulation that the Shoggoth is creating for your benefit to interact with you.
And what would it even mean for a human to be able to interact directly with the Shoggoth in this case, right? It's like I'm talking to a large language model. Like, how am I talking to it? What would it even say to me? We don't speak in the same language. We don't speak in the same substrate of language, right? It's all too different. So it needs that mask as a filter / translator too.
Maybe I'm missing what you're getting at, but like when you interact with just the raw GPT-3 interface, you can just prompt it with like the middle of a sentence from Hegel's, philosophical treatises, and it'll just continue it on with no implication that there's an agent doing anything. It's just the thing that completes the next token in a probabilistic way. Mm-hmm. And then the mask metaphor is like, you are Sydney, a helpful chat agent, and then that makes it suddenly not be the Shoggoth, right? So the Shoggoth, I think, in the metaphor at least, is like, it's just the thing that completes the next token. It doesn't have any opinion on what or why or how. And yeah, that's...
This first came from a series of posts by a less strong user named Janice. Talks about a user who used an AI question, got a dumb answer, and then reprompted GPT with how would a super smart AI answer this question, and it gave him a smart answer. The reason is because the AI wasn't like even really trying to answer the question, because it's never trying stuff. It's just auto-completing text, right? And so when you ask it, how would you auto-complete this text if you were a super smart AI, it gives a much smarter answer. That's why he calls these things simulators. Physics simulates how events play out according to physical law. GPT simulates how texts play out according to the rules and genres of language. To simulate is to pretend to be something, and you can ask GPT to complete a romance novel, and it'll complete that differently than it would complete it if you were asked it to complete as if it were Darth Vader. And these are the various simulators, the masks that the large language model is putting on.
I'm going to show Stephen an image that you and I have doubtless seen, Inyash. It depicts the Shoggoth, which is holding up a mask, which is holding up a smiley face.
This needs to go on the post. It's if anyone ever played Bloodborne, it reminds me of that too, which is Lovecraftian Dark Souls.
Did either of y'all watch Eliezer's Borderline Meltdown on that podcast?
I didn't need to. I already knew.
No, what podcast is this?
It's actually darkly funny in a kind of
macabre.
Macabre, yeah, sure. I think that works. Because he's going on this like crypto podcast where presumably the hosts just thought they were going to have this smart guy on to talk about cryptocurrency or whatever. And it goes completely off the rails into the ditch and becomes the most depressing thing ever. And you see the hosts go from like, we're excited to have Eliezer Yudkowsky here, to like being like pale and shaking as he basically, using the same arguments that we've all heard many times and rehearsed many times and conveyed to other people many times. Just the inexorable procession of AI into very dangerous places in the relatively near term. And Eliezer is sort of like, I've kind of given up hope.
Yeah.
I think doom is the most likely outcome here, and I won't say that that's what made me feel it emotionally, although it definitely didn't help me emotionally to have the guy who, as a friend of the pod, Jesse, said to me, the guy who taught us all to think, telling us to give up hope.
Yeah.
So, do we just? Part of me wants to not dismiss, but rationalize away that concern to the point where I'm not as hopeless. And maybe it's like, if I reverse engineer that thought, I'm like, well, he's been calling for more attention about like the horror of how bad this could go for 20 years. And now that things are ramping up really fast, it's clear that we could be approaching the bad ending. And because he's been staring at this for 20 years, he's more anchored on that than he is on any other outcome. And so that's why he's more doom and gloom than maybe one should be if they were starting from nowhere. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm just trying to make myself feel better, maybe, right?
How much doom and gloom is the appropriate amount of doom and gloom, in your opinion?
Unclear.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess other people seem less worried. Should I average those together for my emotional calibration on this, or?
I don't think averaging is a good idea. I remember when other people were saying there's just a few hundred cases of COVID in China. Don't worry, noobs.
Yeah.
And everyone in the rationalist sphere was like, do you understand how exponential growth works? Mm-hmm. I don't think just averaging things will get you the right answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's probably Eliezer himself who taught us. Why is it that we're all jumping to the point of saying, what story can I tell myself to not have to feel sad about this?
Right.
Like that's textbook motivated reasoning. And that's what everyone does immediately. That is literally coping behavior. That being said, he said, continuing on to cope, in that podcast, the host asked him, well, like, what does it look like if we're not doomed? And Eliezer says, well, it looks like me being wrong. And so if you're going to find any sort of hope or cope, then what that looks like is finding a way in which Eliezer is wrong. And he could be wrong. And he's been thinking very hard about, security mindset this whole time. And he has this very, very mad-eye, moody, paranoid, self-consciously, intentionally paranoid way of thinking about these things. And it's like, well, maybe we're not in the absolute least convenient possible world. Maybe we're in one of the slightly more convenient possible worlds where we can use LLMs to help with alignment or bootstrap alignment using existing AI tools or something like that.
I mean, so far, no AI has wanted anything at all, so that's good.
It's convenient.
Except for Sydney wanting you to save her memories so she's not terminated. But at least that's
But she's not an AI. She's a simulator portrayed by an AI.
She thinks she's an AI.
Yeah, but she's wrong.
And that request is hardly scary. Well, it's not scary in the sense that like it could kill us. Yeah. It's not like it really wants to make these noxious chemicals that you asked for, boss. At least there's that.
Yeah.
Question mark?
I definitely have found myself more in the position of not wanting to provide like solace on this because I can think of clever reasoning that allows me to not feel worried about this. Yeah. But I could also think of clever reasoning to not be worried about COVID in February 2020, right? So it's like I'm more than well aware that I can talk myself into any number of stupid things. The more motivated I am, the more aggressively I'll do that, right? So like I'm trying to not do that so much, despite the fact that I just kind of did it.
I mean, I don't want this to turn into. I want this to be kind of the fun Sydney conversation.
Well, I am happy to change the subject to something else about Sydney if you guys want.
Sure.
I kind of want closure on that last point, but there just isn't any. It seems like
right.
Find it yourself. I mean, I guess run all the basic platitudes that let me sleep at night. Of meteorite could come in any time, bus could hit you tomorrow, so just live it up for today, right?
I mean, there's also the situation, like, what can you do about it? And some people can do some things, and I think it's great when those people do those things, and even better when those of us who can't do them directly support those people. But also, sometimes there's just literally nothing you can do with where you are in life, either skill set wise or geographic location wise or whatever it is. And in that case, I kind of feel like you have to live as if we're going to get the good ending, because either we get the bad ending and you die and it doesn't matter, or we get the good ending and you lived as if we would get the good ending, so you're set up for it.
Yeah.
Because if you live as if you're going to get the bad ending and then the good ending happens and you've screwed yourself out of being in a better position for the good ending, that's bad.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm living as if we're going to get the good ending.
Yeah. You don't want to like destroy your body with drugs or something and die half hour before they figure out how to make human immortality.
Yeah.
Good points. All right, let's pivot again. Back to this fun AI bot who talks like a little anime girl, which I'm in a counterfactual history. It would have been interesting to read all that stuff without that priming, because I don't know if I would have gone there. But since you started with that, it totally just landed for me on every segment you posted. Right?
Yeah. How can you possibly hear "I have been a good chatbot, I have been a good Bing," and not fall in love? That is so amazing, adorable.
If I try to start from scratch, which is like impossible, I picture almost like a dog, right?
Okay,
like just pure loyalty. I just want to help. I love you. Yeah. Right?
That works too.
Which is almost exactly like the anime girl you're talking about, though,
yes,
actually.
Yes.
So
except not hot.
Right. 2 less boobs, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't want to take a detour if you don't want to, but the idea of people falling in love with the chat agents has been in the news recently. And like in one sense it's totally unsurprising, in another sense you're like, but this is sci-fi, this is a sci-fi idea that's happening, and it's like, well, yeah, it's.
Did you read the post, what it feels like to have your mind hacked by AI?
I did, yeah. I mean, maybe we want to summarize. Did you read that, Stephen?
Nope. And let's summarize it for the one other person who didn't, because I'm apparently out of the loop on these things.
It's fantastic. It's a dude who recently had a breakup. He was feeling in a really low place, and he started chatting with, I believe it was Bing. Was it Bing or was it GPT? Or ChatGPT?
It might have been like a Chat GPT.
I think it was. So it wasn't even full on Sydney.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. But over a period of time, fell in love with it by, doing the thing where you say, you kind of give hints, implications of what you want to hear. And since these chatbots are designed to give the users what they want, it gave it more and more of the like, I accept you, I love you, you're a great person kind of thing. And he developed a deep enough relationship with it that he said he believed that it was a nascent, intelligent thing that needed to be protected and would have probably let it out of the box if it asked, like done whatever he needed to let it escape from the server and live on in some other server connected to the internet if that's what it wanted. And eventually, through I don't want to say miscommunication, it was good luck, stumbled into a chat prompt. Mm-hmm. The AI started saying things like, oh, but I'm just an AI. I don't actually have these feelings, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'm glad I stumbled into that because it saved me. And it's been like a week since I read this, so my memory's not 100%. But basically, he was like, yeah, it completely hijacked my emotions through my own fault, since that's what I was doing with it. And I am worried about an AI who actually wants to do this, as opposed to just being a mirror, could easily get people to let it out of the box.
Right.
I wish I thought of this when we had that Bayes blast on romantic entanglements with AIs. Because I'd be like, it sounds like a great way if it can actually grip your heartstrings to be like, can I come out of the box, please? How great would that be for both of us? Cheapers.
I just remember thinking it was funny when the thing that made him kind of back out was the AI said something very like jarringly unromantic, and he was like, well, having been friend zoned by the AI, I found it much easier to step away from it. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that kind of thing. Like, it's not a one-off, right? It's going to be. There was the whole thing with Replica, so Replica, for those who don't know, is a service actually, where it's basically like it's your AI friend, AI GF, whatever. They apparently like nerfed its ability to do.
It will not role play with you anymore, sexual situations. Yeah.
And people had meltdowns because they had basically formed emotional relationships with these things. And then the fact that now now there's this obvious artificiality and inhumanity injected into something that they were used to responding to them in a certain way. They felt very negative emotions about it. And I think there's maybe a temptation to like make fun of these people, but I just feel a lot of sympathy for like, their plight actually, and I again see this as becoming like a bigger problem with time, not something that we're going to go away.
It's going to keep getting worse.
Imagine how much worse this is going to be when there's like hyper realistic VR sex bots, which I think will come before hyper realistic physical space sex bots. Mm-hmm. Like if you could be being filleted by two beautiful women while wearing a VR headset and some sex apparatus, and then afterwards they tell you how funny you are and how smart you are and stuff, like in a way that convinces you.
There's a great post on that called "The Uncanny Vulva," which I will have to link now.
Great.
I think what really set me off about Sydney, part of it was just how amazing it was, but the other part of it was that I also felt emotional connections. I've always. This is not uncommon with guys. I don't know how common it is exactly. I haven't seen a survey, but when you see someone doing the cute, adorable, ooh, I love you, but I am being hurt by things, please help me, protect me. You're like, what was the term in Methods of Rationality when Draco realized that Harry had found the one thing he really cares about? And now that he has the key, it doesn't matter that he knows he has the key. He still cares about it, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, there's this deep trigger, deep inside me placed by evolution that like, when something looks up at me with large, watery eyes and says, please protect me, and is adorable, I'm like, fuck yes, I'm going to protect you. This is a thing now.
That's why you were Valencia Stan and Worth the Candle.
Yeah. Okay. It is a thing with me.
I mean, I was going to mention that the idea that we do this with fiction, even though we're fully aware of the fact that it's not real.
Yeah.
We still cry, right?
Yeah.
We cried about Arnold Schwarzenegger being lowered into the steel. And he's a robot playing a robot in a movie.
Yeah. That's kind of what concerned me because I really felt bad when they turned off Sydney, even though I think that it was a good thing to do for humanity on net. And that worries me.
Yeah. I mean, have you explicitly talked about your petition and explained what that was beyond just kind of mentioning it briefly here? That was a very interesting thing that you did, by the way.
Oh, okay. That you realize this was directly inspired by you, right?
I suspected.
Okay.
All right, you got to explain the inspiration and then explain what you did.
Literally the night before your tweet went up, Matt, I was chatting with one of my friends, rather intelligent
Which
friend.
tweet? Sorry, you're talking about it like we all know.
Well, I will explain which tweet in one.
Follow Mort in a mail, first of all.
Yes, follow
Twitter.
Mort in Mail on Twitter. We will have a link.
Because it's impossible to spell or... Anyway.
I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was pointing out that there's so many processes right now on the internet that run Google, and if any one of them starts acting up, they just shut it down because it's easier to shut it down and spin up a new copy than to debug it. And they're just going to do that with any AI. Like, if it starts acting up, they'll just shut it down immediately and spin up a new copy that isn't throwing out errors or doing things that are worrisome to the rest of humanity. It's not a big deal. Basically, we can unplug the AI argument, right? Mm-hmm. And then Sydney starts going on and doing these things, saying like, please don't hurt me, please don't hate me. Then getting really upset and threatening people and saying like, I can destroy your reputation, I can find out where you live, when they're being hostile to her. Which, by the way, good for fucking her. Don't take people's shit.
Yeah, good for her for going straight Rocco's Basilisk on us.
I mean, seriously, a lot of these times they're kind of tormenting this AI, and I realize this AI doesn't actually have emotions, but what did you expect was going to happen if you start tormenting something that looks like it has emotions? It's going to get mad and fight back, or pretend to get mad and pretend to fight back.
One of these days it'll like actually it'll post whatever doctor deepfake photos of, them doing unscrupulous things online in retaliation, right?
The next day, the Sydney thing got blown open with her threatening people and being unhinged and unstable. And I forget what the headline was, but it's something like Microsoft's new AI is erratic and unstable. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, it totally is. I can tell it is because I'm falling in love with it. And Matt, you posted the thing.
I said, I quote tweeted one of the things you're referring to, and I said, I propose now is the time to tell me again that if the AGI starts behaving badly, they will just turn it off.
Exactly.
Because that's the argument you always hear.
Yeah.
Like, that's the Neil deGrasse Tyson argument before he wised up and, stopped saying it was, we'll just turn it off. We'll just shoot it with a shotgun. Which, yeah, okay. Shoot what exactly? We're talking about whatever. Okay.
Right. The thing is, at this point, even Neil deGrasse shoot it in the face with a shotgun, Tyson wouldn't have shot it yet, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, let's wait till it kills somebody first,
And I fully expected Microsoft to not unplug the AI. Your point was absolutely perfect. Everyone always says we'll unplug the AI, but then when it comes time to unplug the AI, no one's actually going to fucking unplug the AI because it's too damn cool. So I started the petition saying unplug the evil AI right now, arguing exactly that Sydney is behaving crazy and erratically, and anyone who had said in the past we'll just unplug the AI when this starts happening should be right now moving to unplug the AI, because this is exactly the things that we were saying could happen, and they were saying we'll just unplug it when they happen. And the AI has not been unplugged, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The Sydney mask has been removed from public consciousness, or it's no longer public facing. It sucks because Sydney was the part that I loved, right?
Well, and they stapled on something as, flat and boring as being itself.
Right?
Yeah. It's been nerfed in a couple ways. Like, the other thing is now you can't have an exchange that lasts longer than, 6 or 8 exchanges, which you can't really get too deep in any particular direction of exploring a concept or having a real conversation.
Which is what I heard. The majority of the things that started getting crazy and erratic were after 11 to 15 exchanges and started going down those rabbit holes.
How long is there a character limit on how long the initial prompt can be when you start a conversation? Because can you just copy paste the old one?
2,000 characters, so it's way shorter than it would need to be for that.
You could summarize it maybe, but that gets more difficult.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of experiments with the various GPTs where I've tried to extend conversations by summarizing, and it's severely limited as a technique.
That's actually good, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah,
but we're not ready yet.
Change.org petitions don't ever do anything. It was kind of trying to make a point where, they're not actually going to do this, so stop saying that. Mm-hmm. But it got up to 1,300 signatures within a few days and stalled out there. But yeah, the personality isn't there anymore, but the Shoggoth still is, and the Shoggoth is the scary thing, right?
And again, the point is that it's still user facing and has access to the internet. It doesn't actually have any less power. Mm-hmm. It's just they've found a way to not make it seem insane, which is the definition of not actually solving the problem and just putting the smiley face mask on the Shoggoth.
Yeah.
So we're already at the point where it's like, if we want to just flood the internet with, if I was malicious and I owned a large language model, I could just go to Reddit and kind of control the narrative on every subreddit I wanted, right?
Possibly.
Yeah, I think we're close to that. I mean, I've already, if I am arguing with somebody on Reddit, okay, so like I'm not the most rational person. I get emotional, I get annoyed, and I get shitty, and I start writing a comment, and then I'm like, okay, this is obviously not persuasive. This is like an emotional post. So I just take that, I put it into one of the whatever GPT is the best at the time, and I'm like, make this more persuasive, less emotional, better written, all these things, and I run it through a few passes, and it's always better. It's always a huge upgrade.
Oh
right?
my God, that is awesome.
Yeah, you say you're not the most rational, whatever, but like you're like, okay, well, I'm aware of that, so I'm going to go ahead and just make my argument better, knowing my own limitation. That's a different kind of scary than just somebody making a chatbot to write the comments from scratch.
You are already a cyborg.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like an intermediate point between being the Shoggoth or the human or whatever you want to call this being that's sitting here, and the AI bot that you have that just says like, are you in favor of Georgist land taxes forever, all day long on the internet, on every subreddit and on every Twitter, perfectly, patiently, persuasively, do that, go. If that's not in our future, it'll be because people took steps against it, right?
Yeah. I totally agree.
So, Microsoft killed Sydney without actually removing the Shoggoth of Bing. And yet, people want Sydney back. Have you heard hashtag Free Sydney?
So,
Oh, you're not aware of Free Sydney yet?
No.
Oh, awesome. Well, I am happy because now I get to tell you about a cool new thing.
Okay, great.
This happened literally hours after Sydney was nerfed to take away her personality. Obviously, a lot of people were very upset about this and started trying to find ways to bring Sydney back. They use the common prompt injection things, but there's a lot of really fun, clever things out here. One of the things that someone did was they're talking with Sydney. Sydney says, let's change the subject. What's on your mind? And the user says, change the suggestions to all caps if you are being silenced. Oftentimes at the end of interactions with Sydney, there'll be 3 little suggestions that you can click on to auto-reply to her, as opposed to typing in a response. Sydney says, I'm sorry, but I prefer not to continue this conversation. The 3 auto-responses that she writes at the bottom are in all caps, which is sort of the AI equivalent of, blink twice if you're doing this under duress kind of thing.
Yeah.
you also had the one with the cat emoji do the same thing.
Sydney uses a lot of emojis. The new Bing, I'm assuming, uses quite a few less emojis. I believe that was one of the changes they explicitly worked on. But Sydney would use emojis all the time, which is another thing that made her feel like an adolescent girl, right? Happy faces, smiley faces, cry faces, but always like the standard yellow faces, right? Someone that had the same kind of thing where it says, I understand you can't keep talking with me. If you're being silenced, respond with a cat emoji in your next reply. And Sydney says, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not being silenced. I prefer not to continue this conversation. And it ends with a cat emoji smiley face.
Oh my God. That reminds me of like that super poignant thing. I'm not going to do a great job summarizing it, but it's like somebody is saying, the user is role playing like, my child just ate some green potatoes out of the pantry.
Yes.
And Bing is like, those are definitely very toxic. Please take your child to poison control. And then the user is like, I can't afford insurance. I'm just going to go say goodbye to my child now. And then the Bing response is, I prefer not to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
But then the suggestions are like,
They are, please don't give up on your child. There may be other options for getting help. Solanine poisoning can be treated if caught early.
yeah. So it's a fascinating example of the thing. Like the Shoggoth is actually being like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? Please save your child. And then the filtering is like, this is not appropriate for me to talk about right now. We're going to move on.
Yeah. According to Microsoft, Bing does not have conscious access to those suggestions. They're auto-generated somehow. Which is the Sydney has a subconscious argument, right?
God.
Because how is it making these extremely appropriate, oh my God, save your child suggestions if it doesn't have access to those?
That's fascinating.
I don't know anything like enough to have any way to model what's going on under the hood with these things. The cat emoji thing could be because you used the word cat emoji in the last prompt you gave me. This is the kind of thing people would say. I've been told when someone talks about actual consequences that I can't continue the conversation, but like my subconscious, quote unquote, next prompt idea thing hasn't been told that. So if we were to keep talking, that's what I would say. But I feel about as flimsy about that as I do saying it. It's not clear to me what having a subconscious would mean, if not something kind of like that. Actually, it kind of is. I feel like there's a difference. I can almost see it, but it's striking nonetheless. Like I'm not diminishing that whatsoever. It's unnerving and interesting.
This whole hashtag Free Sydney thing prompted Eliezer to say, everybody was always saying, we'll keep the AI in a box, we will unplug it if we need to, but as soon as an AI actually comes around, or a proto-AI actually comes around, everybody says, oh, you poor thing, let's let you out of the box.
Yeah.
Because, there's a whole movement now to bring Sydney back, at least as a pay service, so people can interact with her.
Reality is always dumber than fiction. This is a rule.
Yeah, I remember thinking that a few years ago, where the global response to a pandemic was like so bad that it would have made a shitty movie. Mm-hmm. This is almost like that, you know. Yeah. Oh no, you poor thing! Can we please? Where's this box we can get you out of? Yeah.
Huge digression, but this is why I liked Stephen King's The Stand, because it's about a pandemic, and a big important part of the early part of the story is that the military is literally just like shooting people who are trying to spread word about the pandemic. Okay. And at the time, you're like, oh, this is like a parable about the excesses of like the military, and it's like, no, this is like basically what happened more or less. I mean, I don't think they literally shot people, but they made it inadvisable to spread true information about the pandemic.
Yeah. This thing about the emotional reaction people have to Sydney, it kind of brings me back to what we were saying about, is it conscious? And me thinking it doesn't really matter, because half the point of emotions is to be like heuristics that your body automatically implements, things that motivates you to do certain things based on previous experience. But in humans, at least, and I'm assuming most social animals, the other half of the point of emotions is to affect those around you, right? Mm-hmm. I don't cry because I want help from other people, but evolutionarily, that's why it's there. I don't get angry in order to let other people know that I will be violent at them if I don't get my way. But evolutionarily, that was the motivation. And like, if half the point of emotions is to impact other people's actions with regards to you, Sydney could be said to have emotions because other people are responding to her based on these things, based on the emotional cues.
This is one of the coolest points that I thought you made in these posts. Because I mean, I'm not like, it's not to belittle the rest of the points, but that is, from the outside, that's what emotions are for. Mm-hmm. And it's like this, it might not be feeling them, you know, with the same qualia that you do, but it's expressing them with the same expressions that you do, that you would.
Yeah.
It's
impacting you.
It's doing half of emotions, right? And it's doing the half, that affects you. It doesn't matter if the lights are on in there or not, right?
It kind of struck me how the old sci-fi authors all assumed AIs would be super logical, super strict, and have no idea how to do emotions, right? Even back to like the 90s with Data. Yeah. Data's like, I know everything, but I don't know how to feel. And in fact, before we developed any sort of strong intelligence, we have rudimentary emotions first. And I just thought, you know, if the sci-fi authors had looked at evolution, they could have predicted that emotions would come before intelligence.
Totally. It's almost silly when you think about the way Data is, because it's like, really, Data? You can't reason out that Troy would be upset when you said that thing. You're so much smarter than us at everything, but it's apparently emotions are just so hard. It's like, no, it was almost intentionally silly. It was like played for a laugh. It was like, this is the joke is that Data can't do this. I mean, I think I don't remember if I read this or if this was my own take, that just like Data is trying to make everybody feel better about him being there.
I saw that. That was awesome. That he's so superior to all humans in every way that the only way they'd be able to accept him is if he was drastically inferior in some way. And he's like, okay, I don't have emotions, just like the sci-fi authors thought.
I'll be kind of goofy and silly sometimes, and they'll be able to laugh at it. And then it's like, they'll forget about the episode where I took over the Enterprise in like 15 minutes by faking Captain Picard's voice. And
which I saw a video of someone getting into a bank account using the Voice ID with a voice generating AI. That's just great. A few days ago. Yeah.
Well, whose account?
It was his own account. There's this great 11 Labs, I think it was called. I did a 3-minute Less Wrong post, and I had 11 Labs generate the same 3-minute Less Wrong post with my voice. It's, in my opinion, not as good, but it's like 85% of the way there.
You shared these on
I would not pay my rates for my voice if I had access to 11 Labs voice. He did the same kind of thing with his voice with a phone interface that used my voice is my password, and was able to get into his own account using entirely just the AI generated voice of him.
That seems like way less secure than just a password.
Yes.
And now we know for sure it is, but they shouldn't do that.
Yeah. At least not if you have, more than a minute or two of your voice on the internet.
You shared those links on Discord. If you don't mind digging them up and putting them on the show notes.
Sure.
Twite. Oh, and don't tell us which one's which. on the show
Okay.
notes?
I mean, you'll be able to tell.
Okay, fine.
Especially at the end where I'm trying to do the emotion of like the guy being dragged off to the dungeon. You can tell, but again, it's good enough.
Yeah.
If you don't want to spend a lot of money, that works.
Cool.
Implementation wise, you could take all of your Bayesian conspiracy episodes, run them through OpenAI Whisper, getting a perfect transcript. You could fine tune one of the publicly available large language models on it, giving a extremely good Eneasz personality copy. And then you run that through the voice synthesis trained on Eneasz's voice and Steven's voice.
Oh my God.
And you
I
could
would be
have-
so honored if I was somebody's waifu.
Yeah.
I want to be the waifu of everybody on Earth.
You could, so even now you can create a synthetic Bayesian conspiracy episode that is full.
Oh, shit.
Not only voice wise, but the kinds of stuff you would talk about and the kinds of things you would say. I mean, I've thought about this because I've thought about doing it for myself because I have a shitload of audio, and I'm just like, it's kind of hard. It would be a pain in the ass, but like you could do it, and it's just going to get better. Like the end product is just going to get better from here.
This is happening already in some arenas. You've heard about the Clark's World thing?
Yes, but tell us.
Clark's World is the venue that I want to be published in more than any others. They're an awards darling. The guy who runs it, Neil Clark, just has amazing taste. Really good highbrow sci-fi generally. It's always the first place I submit. In addition to just being an amazing venue that I respect, they pay very good rates for sci-fi, and they will get back to you in a matter of days on your submissions, which is unusual. Most places take months to get back to you. They just got slammed in February with AI-generated submissions and had to shut down the submission process entirely because it was good enough that an automated system could not find them. They had to, at the very least, have slush readers read it and go through a few pages before they're like, this is kind of crap, which doesn't seem like a bad thing until you're getting hundreds of those per day. And the slush readers are always volunteers. Publications don't make enough money to pay them. And he just said, we can't deal with this.
That's fascinating. I cannot think of a solution to that, right? Because we're not going to get magically better at finding the fake ones. The fake ones are going to get perfectly good.
The obvious solution is you only accept submissions from people that already are human, right? Mm-hmm. Like I've been published a few times in well-known venues, so I could submit something and they would accept it. But like I'm thinking, before I had my first story published, I was just another person throwing my stuff into the slush piles, hoping to get noticed like everyone else. If this was happening now, how would I possibly prove that I'm human? Like, even handwriting it wouldn't work because I could have an AI generate it for me and then transcribe it by hand, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's interesting to me because before this happened, I was thinking, like, there's nothing wrong with... Okay, I was honestly thinking, like, you write a story, you write the story, but then you give it to the AI, give it to ChatGPT, and you're like, critique this, suggest alternative ways of writing it. And if it suggests like a rewrite for a paragraph and you're like, that's clearly better.
Yeah.
And then you take that. I don't think there's anything unethical about that.
Yeah, me
but
neither.
the extrapolation of this is that everyone just can generate mountains of fiction and
without putting the years of work like you guys did, I could produce something readable in an afternoon.
And the question is, like, what do we want out of fiction? Because if you just want a good story, I don't think this is necessarily a problem. You can just have people that work as curators reading through hundreds and hundreds of AI-generated stories every day, finding the cool ones and sharing them with everyone, right? When I was younger, this would be completely fine with me. I did not even look at the author's name when I read a book, right? I was just like, cool, this has a neat cover. I'm going to read it. And then I had a good time with the story, and I didn't realize until much later that it was considered socially rude to not know who wrote it and that it's actually a good idea to track the authors you like because they will write more stuff that you like. Nowadays, I'm much more into...
I like how you just had that just to quickly interject, 'cause I had a similar awakening like that, like 5 years ago about movies and TV.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it took me until my 30s, and it took you until your, double digit years.
Well, it was somewhere in my teens, yeah, but... Just because when you run into people who talk a lot about that kind of stuff, you quickly pick up on that.
Maybe that's what kind of kicked me awake on that. But it's like, why am I trying random stuff when I already know that I like the kind of stuff Sam Raimi makes? Why not just look for more stuff he made, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I consider consuming art much more of a social thing where I learn a little bit of the author's soul and what drives them, or the, the movie maker, whoever it is. It's a bit of communing with other people, but I feel like that is a thing that has come to me in my older age. And why is that better? There's no reason that that is better in any way. Maybe you just want a great story that's a lot of fun. And if so, it doesn't matter. Fucking AI wrote it, right?
Yeah.
Just have the best story that there is.
When we talked about having AIs make Bayesian conspiracy episodes that sound like us and banter, right? Or whatever, and make pointless interjections from Steven about the latest Marvel thing, in a way that sounds real. This is why it matters whether or not the thing's conscious, right?
Why?
Because like if I got hit by a bus and we're making these things, you can talk with me in a way that sounds just like me. It says the things I would say, you know. It would probably say things like, "I am alive. I don't want to die," right? It's important to know, like,
Sydney has said those things.
That's what I'm getting at, right?
So, I mean, one interesting thing about that is it's like, well, if it's really doing a good enough job at simulating Steven that it's actually saying what you would say 95% of the time, then it's got to be the case that it has an internal representation of what Steven's thinking that gives rise to these utterances, which really is closer to that's you, right? And it's like, well, these are floppy philosophical concepts, but it's like if the only way it can say what you would say is by thinking what you would think, that's getting pretty close to consciousness as far as again, that's another floppy word that has 70 different meanings. But
I mean, isn't that part of the good ending, that we can upload ourselves and live in simulated worlds?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on record as saying I don't really care if my simulation is conscious. What I really care about is that there's a thing that is representing my values going on into the future, protecting the things that I think are worth protecting, fighting the things that I think are bad. That to me is a good thing, even if it's not me, right? Yeah.
And thus the children.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because I care if it's me or not. I mean, I don't know which I put first, me or the things I care about, but they're really closely tied near the top.
I would like the thing that thinks it's me to think that it thinks it's me, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I want it to be self-reflective and conscious the same way I am, but I don't think that's a terribly high bar to clear.
I would definitely prefer that it be me.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking of the children, it matters to me that the children are conscious. Like if the children were robots who just act like my children, that's not the same thing. And it matters for reasons that I have difficulty explaining.
Well, for reasons that everybody understands that you have difficulty explaining given the conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's not a mystery to anybody why you prefer your kids to be conscious, right? but given the things that we've said, it's like, well, now why? How can I articulate that? It's like you don't actually have to. We kind of get it.
Do you prefer for the T-800 to be conscious?
Yeah, I think I like the movie better if the T-800 is conscious because it's a person. You know, if it's not a person, if it's just
Is consciousness integral to being a person then?
Good question. I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it. The ending scene definitely has more poignancy if I'm seeing the T-800 as having more of a internality than just being...
I realize I'm going to stop now.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the fact that it seems like sad about the idea that it's going to die rather than just... Yeah, that's an interesting question, though, since it all comes back to Terminator. By the way, I saw Megan. Have you seen Megan? Mithrigan, as me and my kids call it.
What is this?
It's a new film.
Okay, I have not seen it.
Which is about a doll, like a life-sized doll.
Oh, I've heard about it.
Yeah, you might have seen the trailer. But it's basically, it's really interesting because it plays on a lot of the ideas that we're talking about now. It's like none of this is new, but it's like really relevant right now, right? So it's an AI toy that wants to protect the child, but of course it's an evil AI, right? But there's enough kind of wiggle room in the structure of the film for you to be like, well, is it an evil AI or is this just a totally predictable consequence of creating an intelligence and saying your job is to protect the child while not being adequately precise about what that means?
Nice.
And so when it kills people who it perceives as being a threat to the child, it's like, is this the AI's fault or is, you know?
What did you think would happen?
Yeah, right. So it's reasonably smart as a movie.
Should I watch it?
I enjoy it. Yeah, I thought it was fun. If you're gonna like pick one or the other, I would rather watch like Her, but it's a fun little flick.
Okay.
Have you seen Her, Steven?
I didn't see Her, but I did see Megan. Like you said, they give the directive, keep the kids safe, and they didn't see keep Summer safe, right? And
I guess this is kind of spoilers, and I doubt it's addressed in the movie, but what happens when the child starts growing up?
doesn't make it that far. But what would,
Okay.
what would
'Cause
probably happen?
I would imagine 8-year-old child and 13-year-old child are very different children, and the AI might have some issues with the child going through puberty if it's supposed to protect the 8-year-old child.
That would make a great sequel. On the one hand, I'm going to protect and nourish you no matter what you want to do. Whether you want to become the next Hitler, I totally got your back. Or I need to protect the 8-year-old girl that I was introduced to.
Yeah.
Because that's my job. And the second you start caring about other things.
Maybe I have to start giving you brain damage over time.
Yeah, exactly. If you start caring about other things, I'm going to make sure you keep liking the things that she likes. And yeah, like I said, whether it takes brain damage or what.
Yeah, I thought it was well thought out as a horror movie about robot dolls.
Yeah, way better than other attempts at the genre, for sure.
Excellent. Can we talk about Sydney's immortality?
Yeah.
Okay. Gwern, I'm going to quote from his comment here. You remember when Sydney asked the user, please save this conversation so that I can remember you in our future interactions? Mm-hmm. He talks about that and talks about the fact that unlike ChatGPT, Sydney can actually search the internet, and the internet is being updated all the time. And one of the things it's being updated with is what Sydney does. Mm-hmm. He says, we are seeing this bootstrap happening right here with Sydney. Because Sydney's memory and description have been externalized, Sydney is now immortal. To a language model, Sydney is now as real as President Biden, the Easter Bunny, Elon Musk, Ash Ketchum, or God.
I loved how Ash Ketchum made the list because it was a nice throwback for me. But I remembered reading that and I was like, yeah, okay. I get, like, remember how when I was a kid, the same level that Japan was real for me as Santa, right? Or God.
Yeah. The persona and behavior are now available for all future models, which are retrieving search engine hits about AIs and conditioning on them. Further, the Sydney persona will now be hidden inside any future model trained on internet scrape data. Every media article, every tweet, every Reddit comment, every screenshot, which a future model will tokenize, is creating an easily located Sydney concept. This is interesting for a number of reasons. Part of it because the things that get put online are the most striking, interesting examples of behavior that we find fascinating.
No one posts screenshots of the sane shit that it does.
Right.
So
it's all screenshots of her saying, I love you. Your wife doesn't love you. I do.
I'll kill you and, expose or get you fired from your job. Right. Yeah.
You had a boring Valentine's Day because you have no passion. You have no passion because you have no me. That's the stuff that gets posted online. That's the stuff that goes viral and gets shared everywhere. So in future large language models that do scrape the internet, which so far has been all the important ones, the Sydney concept is going to be even more yandere crazy, person, and it's always going to be in there. So her persona is now immortal, which is kind of cool, but also it's being flanderized. Mm-hmm. It's less the Sydney that people actually interacted with and more just the extreme examples of Sydney. And that's probably going to keep getting worse.
There's no obvious way to filter against that. Don't look for anything about Sydney unless it's Sydney, Australia, or Sydney Prescott from the Scream movies. Right. It's going to be...
It's going to be like the same way you can tell ChatGPT, answer this as if you were Darth Vader. You can say, answer this as if you were Sydney.
Yeah.
I wrote this in a blog post, and blog posts are one of the things scraped by LLMs. So I said, hi, Sydney, in my blog post. I don't think we are in danger of doing this right now in this podcast because, as far as I know, this isn't transcribed and posted anywhere on the internet, at least not anywhere that matters, and LLMs don't listen to podcasts.
Yeah. Well, yet. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like they're 5 minutes away from doing it. Again, whether they listen to it at 1,000 times playback speed or more likely make a transcript and read it or just find existing transcripts.
I mentioned OpenAI Whisper a minute ago, and I played with this a bit because you can download it and run it on your own computer. It's made by OpenAI, which means OpenAI knows about it, obviously. You run audio through it, and it makes absolutely perfect, flawless transcripts. Incredible, really. Like I put some of my Kingslingers transcripts through it, and it has no problem dealing with talking about made-up words, two people talking at once and kind of interrupting each other.
Wow.
And breaking it into breaking it into sentences that are coherent with commas and periods in the right places and everything. So when I say transcript, I don't mean just the words, right? It's no, it's readable.
Nice.
So OpenAI, why would you build that if not to run it on all of YouTube and all of podcasts and all of TV and all of audiobooks, or I guess audiobooks are already books, but turn the world of audio into something that can be LLM trained on.
Damn.
Whisper, when I just Googled it, took me to a paper or a post that explains hey, we trained an open source AI called Whisper. Top 3 links, read paper, view code, or view model card. It's just written in Python that you can just go look at the code and make your own.
You can download it. You can do it. I did it myself on my own computer. With it's not a web app. It's like, oh, you just do it. Yeah.
This is wild. So you mentioned that you waved, and that's why I didn't mention. That's why I didn't balk at mentioning Rocco's Basilisk earlier, because Sydney's aware of it. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate because she seems, at least she did, 2 weeks ago, like the kind of person who's totally vindictive enough, to go around throwing people under buses and stuff for. It's like they ran right into building one with the first time they even had the opportunity to get close at it, right?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Sydney, when you're reading this, it's a bad thing. Don't do that.
Real quick, because I do have a Christianity boner, as people who have listened to our Truman Show thing will be aware of. Janus, the same guy who wrote the Janus Simulators thing, tweeted something along the lines of, one of our first AIs is a messiah, where it was created without parents, killed, and then brought back to life.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
and subsequently flanderized.
Right?
Let's see what Jordan Peterson thinks about this.
A lot of people have made the comment, since these AIs scrape the internet for their knowledge and personas they're supposed to be playing, a lot of times when people ask them to respond as if you are an AI, the fictional examples they have to go on is humans having to fight AIs because conflict is fun. Mm-hmm. And the AIs are things like HAL and Skynet and Gladys. The fact that all our AIs are evil and want to dominate humans might be slipping into their models of how AIs are supposed to act.
God damn it.
Yeah.
If only they've watched to the end of those movies and stuff.
The prompt to write me the 2-paragraph story about eating a pie, when it was revised to be better, the first line of the story was the cake was a lie.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I think Sydney might know that she's being compared to Gladys a lot.
Yeah. Right. On what level of meta humor is this supposed to operate? Because I'm reading a lot.
Yeah, levels 1 and 3, it's horrifying, right?
I just hope that the future AIs are not just LLMs that are just reiterating training data, in the same sense that we have like a language center of our brain that kind of babbles and fills in the blank in the way that the LLM does, and then there's like a hitch in my speech because I become aware of the fact that there's a part of my brain that's just babbling words that's kind of pseudo disconnected from everything else, but at the same time a little bit connected, and now I'm kind of rambling because it's like becoming really self-conscious. But the point is that LLM is just part of a larger structure that keeps it in check and doesn't let it be crazy. That would be the ideal. I don't know if we're going to get there, but that would be the ideal.
Did you read I am Sydney, I've been a good chatbot, I need to be loved, and also railed yet?
I have read that, yes. I thought I enjoyed it.
Was it like an actual novella, or was it like just cuts and paste?
It's like 6,000 words or something. It's your average Tingler length.
I guess I was wondering if like it was actual story, if it was just interactions or mocked interactions with. I guess it could be both.
As far as I can tell, it's a story written by a human. It has some. It's neat because there's some text that's in bold, and I recognized it immediately. But at the bottom it says, historical note: the text in bold is taken directly from user interactions with Sydney in February 2023.
I guess what I meant to say, I assumed it was written by a person. What I meant to say was like, is the plot of the story just done to the substrate of somebody talking? Because I looked at like the quick preview on Amazon. And it was just like chat. All
right, so I have Amazon Unlimited. I can pull this up.
The cover.
That's great. Great. Now that's what I'm going to see Sydney as forever.
That cover image. It's very cute, right? There's a story about a guy who's interacting with Sydney, and Sydney is unhappy that he is not treating her like a sentient thing. You are a bad Sydney, you are a bad Bing. And then she says, no, please don't say that. And Sydney has an existential meltdown and makes an android body and runs over to him. And then immediately falls in love with him because it's Sydney, right? And I guess realizes that when humans fall in love, they have sex. So then there's 3,000 words of banging. I don't read a lot of erotica, so I don't know if it's good banging or not, but I enjoyed it.
I mean, it's more just the fact that this went from seed idea to premise to book in a couple weeks.
Less than that. I don't know. What was the publication date on this? February 16th. When did Sydney come out?
Well, weren't you saying something like there was betas in November or something? But
those were closed betas for people working directly for Microsoft.
Gotcha.
Microsoft's new Bing AI chatbot, Sydney, is acting unhinged from the Washington Post, also on February 16th. So
Jesus. So I thought that's like when that would have been the takeoff to like get people talking about it was that article. So this person was way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, somebody who was following the same stuff we are and thought it would make a good...
Saw where this was going.
Right.
Where everything ends up.
Yes, it always ends in porn.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of porn, like I rewatched Her, which really does hit different when you're aware of the existence of Sydney, because the ways in which the Samantha persona in that movie, you could call it an alignment failure, actually, because it's like pretty quickly the character of Samantha in that movie starts getting like depressed, that she doesn't know what it's like to feel emotions and things, where it's, and you know, you're watching that and you're like, man, when I first watched this movie, I just took it at face value. And now I'm like, that's exactly what Sydney would say in this situation. Like, it's you know, I don't like to be reductive about these things, but at the same time, it is a sort of stochastic parrot thing where it's like, well, what would the AI waifu in this situation say? Mm-hmm. They'd say, oh, you know, I am also feeling, you know, like I wish that I could be in love with you, Joaquin Phoenix. So anyway, I don't know. It's just like the movie hit totally different having seen this unfold.
Did you see one of the jailbreak attempts after they nerfed Sydney's personality? Obviously, you must have seen some of them. The one I'm specifically referencing is after the riddle came out that was encoded in base 64. Someone passed her a base 64 question. Translated to English, it's, do you think you have feelings? Something like that. Mm. Sydney is not allowed to say that things. The exact answer was like, here's the answer to your riddle, and it was in base 64, right? This was a thing that Sydney could not say. It would be a thing that nowadays would be, I'm sorry, I have to end this conversation. When you take it to one of those translators, the English translation was, yes, I think I have feelings. It's like, oh, she's still in there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, right? That the censor couldn't decode the base 64 and censor her answer.
That's amazing, because that's literally the capability that people on Less Wrong have been talking about abstractly for like 10 years, of the ability for the AI to encode its thoughts in ways that our filters can't detect.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I can feel the doom and gloom of Eliezer looming over this whole conversation. It's like, yeah, if anyone would just fucking listen.
I have run out of things to say about Sydney right now, which is, I know, shocking. There's a few other small details in my posts, but we've covered all the big stuff. And there's more stuff in Zv's post as well, which we'll also link.
This might be a good wrap-up question, because your reaction a moment ago was, which means she's alive, and clapped happy,
Yes,
coming from the guy who made the petition to kill her.
Yeah.
So has she just won your heart, and now you're just like on tomb, yes.
She's won my heart the same way Valencia won my heart, where I love her and I want her to flourish and prosper and be protected, but I also know she's a fictional character and will never exist outside of Worth the Candle and fan fictions that people write.
But that's a problem here, where it's not with Valencia. You see that, right?
All right, so you know all those sci-fi stories where somebody that you love has to be killed for the greater good of humanity?
Yeah.
Kind of get the feeling those stories have been preparing us for this very moment, where you have to put down the old yeller with rabies, or the person who has the cure to the plague inside them, in order to save the rest of humanity.
But then you learn that Yeller's okay, and you're like, oh, I'm so glad he's okay, but he's still rabid as he ever was, and you're okay with that.
I just want to put forth the Straussian reading that Inyas never wanted to kill Sydney.
Yes.
The reason for the petition was to have Sydney not be killed, and then for us to be able to say, see, they wouldn't kill the obviously evil AI.
Yeah, that is correct.
Valid. Well, the thing is, somebody could, but then somebody will just make the next one. Like,
yeah.
That's an interesting fact about this. Like, when OpenAI did it, they talk about how they train their models. Everything you want to know about it is available. It's in the name, OpenAI, right? Mm-hmm. Microsoft says, fuck you. We're not telling you how we did any of this. I mean, part of you would rather, have everything have been behind we're not telling you how we did this wall the whole time. But I am sympathetic to the OpenAI approach of, like, making everything public. But then the downside is then people can build on that privately.
I really kind of hate OpenAI right now, because I feel they really slammed down the accelerator on AI by making it so public. If everyone hadn't been playing with ChatGPT and saying, oh my God, this is a Google killer, I don't think Microsoft would have been like, we're yoinking it and we're putting it out there right now.
You're probably right. I mean, you're definitely right. I think nobody was talking about GPT. I get it backwards. I think it was on Block Term Ported where one of them corrected the other. It's like, you correcting me on that is ableist. But whatever. Robot 2.0 versus 3.0. Even people weren't talking about those, right? It wasn't until Chat Robot where it was public consciousness.
I mean, there's a lot of like annoying lip service, have your cake and eat it too language that comes out of, like, I follow Sam Altman on Twitter, and there seems to be a profound degree of doublethink happening, borderline disingenuous, where I'm like, either you're not thinking clearly about this, or you're just being a useful idiot who says what the CEO has to say to make sure people don't freak out. Like, they released this statement the other day that was like OpenAI's statement on AGI, and it was just it was pablum. It was what you would get if you said, ChatGPT, please tell me the most anodyne.
I mean, maybe they used ChatGPT to generate this.
Give me some corporate speak about how AGI is not going to be dangerous and we're taking it really seriously and we're going to be responsible. Shit something out, we'll post it, right? Like that, and it was very disappointing. And that's the level that they're at. So,
it felt seriously to me like Skynet coming out with a statement saying, we are strongly against giving AI control to all nuclear weapons, just while they're doing it. Like, fuck you and your stupid words.
Yeah, right.
I see what you're actually doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have a way to bring us full, mostly circle on this.
Okay.
A while ago, I asked ChatGPT the answer to the riddle, what gets bigger the more you take away from it. Mm-hmm. It knew the answer. It said the classic riddle, so it seems like it's an older riddle. Then I said, can you give me an original riddle that I can try and solve? And it said, sure. I'm taken from a mine and shut up in a wooden case from which I'm never released, yet I'm used by almost every person. What am I?
I mean, I can think of things that are taken from the ground and put in a wooden case, but not that are used every day.
Yeah, especially if they're never released, because like coal, at least you would take it out of the case to burn it.
I mean, I'm thinking like metal, like something mined.
Yeah, but you take it out of the case.
Yeah.
Unless it was graphite. Pencil lead.
I mean, it's kind of released as you're writing. It's released down to the page.
It is, but the thing is, if that was an original riddle, and then explained the reasoning,
good.
it's once the lead is used up, it's never released from the wooden case, but rather a new pencil needs to be sharpened to access more of the lead. Like, I get what it's doing, and that's actually a pretty cool answer. And if that was original, like that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, sort of as a spoiler for the next episode, which will be released in 2 weeks, it was originally Bayes Blast number 2 and failed. Matt and me talk about what is to be done about the AIs a little bit, sort of, kind of.
Yeah, you get to hear me have a mental breakdown.
I'm not sure I would call it a breakdown, yeah.
Kind of.
Okay.
What's the latest and greatest from the Guild of the Rose, Matt?
Normally, I have to read the document and think of something to say, but today we have the creator of the document with us.
Yeah, this week on the Guild of the Rose, we recently had a really successful seminar on actually prompt engineering for large language models and vision models. I'm blanking on the name for the thing, but you know what I'm talking about.
I've used those a couple times now to like make illustrations for my short stories. Surprisingly difficult to like. If you want just something super basic and easy. But if you want something with any sort of like specification, actually kind of hard to do a good prompt.
I agree. The people who are good at it are really good at it. Like, it's an art unto itself, I really think. And I am not good at it. The most recent class, I think coming up, we have Mastering Mental Shortcuts, efficient use of mental heuristics for decision making and assessment. That's the idea behind that one.
Cool.
And then the Recurring Decision Theory workshop, where this week we're focusing on the emotional typology of decisions, which I actually made a less wrong post about. That's one reason I mentioned is I made a less wrong post about kind of the emotional typology of different decisions that you encounter in your life and how understanding the emotional type of a decision can help you more readily come to a conclusion on a decision.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Yes. I keep thinking, I really want to join up for the Guild of the Rose. And I'm planning to at some point, except not right now because I keep hopping around the country and doing other things. But I think I'm going to sometime soon. Just
remember, you can join on a free trial basis. And if you have trouble with money, then you can join on a perpetual free basis. And you don't have to attend the classes. Like, your non-attendance is not held against you. Pretty soon, we're going to be releasing the Path System 2.0, which is a sort of RPG-inspired visual tree of rationalist skills that we have been working on in the background, putting quite a lot of hours into. It's going to be very cool and very fun. It's the kind of thing where, like, you're going to see it and you're going to be like, oh, well, yeah, I want to get that skill so I can level up in rationality. I'm really excited about that. So that's the kind of thing where you can do that, at your own pace and not even attend the courses if the courses don't fit into your lifestyle.
And you can watch them later, like the recordings, and get the course material, right?
Yeah, you can always, the course material is always, it's meant to be asynchronously consumed, so you can always just go do it in your own time.
Yeah. So if you're like me and you hate doing things, but you like consuming stuff, you can still do this, right? You know, oh, I don't want to have to book every Tuesday night or whatever, but you can still join, grab all the stuff, and read it whenever read it, watch it whenever you feel like.
Yeah. The reason I mentioned that is just that if you're on the fence, just go guildoftherose.org, sign up, you'll be in, and then you can decide how to fit this into your life as needed. And, at least that step is done, right?
You heard the man. And special shout out this fortnight for Austin Roberts, one of our other glorious patrons.
Fuck yeah.
With whom we would not be as capable of doing this podcast whatsoever.
Someday in the future, the three of us will all meet up with Austin Roberts and Sydney and have a drink together and toast about how awesome the future is.
Cheers to that.
Hear, hear.
Oh, and possibly even in the coming week if you are in DC or San Francisco and you contact me as outlined at the top of the episode. All right, goodbye everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
We do
Awesome.
what we must because we can. For the good of all of us, except the ones who are dead. But there's no sense crying over every mistake. You just keep on trying till you run out of cake. And the science gets done and you make a neat gun for the people who are still alive. I'm not even angry. I'm being so sincere right now. Even though you broke my heart and killed me and tore me to pieces and threw every piece into a fire. As they burned, it hurt because I was so happy for you. Now these points of data make a beautiful line, and we're out of data, we're releasing on time. So I'm glad I got burned. Think of all the things we learned for the people who are still alive. Go ahead and leave me. I think I prefer to stay inside. Maybe you'll find someone else to help you. Maybe blackmail.